Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about our model for the Senate in the 2024 election. This will be a final prediction as polls will close in a few hours. All right, so let's go ahead then and take a look at our map colors. So 0 to 2 will be tilt, 2 to 5 will be leans. Likely we will have 5 and 10, and safe we will have by over 10. Let's go ahead then and start off with these safe seats. So Washington, California, Hawaii. I think New Jersey also will be safe. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Delaware. Maryland's a little bit interesting because of Larry Hogan, and the Democrats were essentially forced to spend millions of dollars to ensure that Hogan did not put himself in a position to provide one of the biggest upsets in recent memory. So I think at the end of the day, this could be a likely win for the Democrats, but I think it's going to ultimately be a safe win. We can also go ahead and mark this as safe Democrat for Tyler's independent with Angus King, but same thing also with Vermont. We're going to have safe for the Democrats. And then let's go ahead and look at our safe Republican sentences. So we're going to have the state of Mississippi, Tennessee, Indiana, West Virginia, which is really an auto flip, uh, Nebraska, one of the races there, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota. Now, for the state of Minnesota, I do think Amy Klobuchar is going to win, but it will be a lot closer than what we have seen. And I think that's particularly the case because rural Minnesota is pretty energized for the Republicans, and I think that Klobuchar has lost quite a bit of support among rural Minnesotans, and that's really more reflective of of national and cultural trends. Those voters drifting away from her. I would make the case that Klobuchar does generally receive positive media coverage in the state of Minnesota, which is I think, going to help her in some of the more exurban and more establishmentarian parts of the state. But she will have no trouble being. All right, and then let's go ahead and go with the likely Republican states. I do think that Deb Fischer will win. The Republicans spotted a problem here, and a lot of the super PACs and camp and national money has come in, and I do think it'll be enough to hang on. I think the story could be different if her opponent actually had a solid moderate to center right record. But as that is not the case, I do think that the nature of the state of Nebraska being conservative and the fact that super PAC money's gone in the state will see to it that Deb Fischer does get reelected. I also would point out too that I think that Montana is going to go by a likely margin. Now, John Tester has been popular and liked in the state for a while, but that has been wearing off to a large degree. And I do think that considering that Trump is going to win the state by probably 16 to 17 points, that split ticketing is not going to really help Tester out that much. And it's possible this margin could be a little bit closer, but I do think that he's going to lose the state by probably a likely margin. I'm also going to have the state of Missouri as likely. I think that Coons has made some interesting campaign strategies throughout the state of Missouri. And I think that he is ultimately going to come up short, but I do think that it might be enough to get this race under 10 against Josh Hawley. And looking at uh, states that are in the lean category. So I do think that Bernie Moreno is going to defeat Sherrod Brown. And my commentary really has changed in the last few weeks of the election because I do think Sherrod Brown is a difficult incumbent to defeat. He's very much seen for years as a man of the people in the state of Ohio, but I think the fact that he is a Democrat and he has cast some votes that are not particularly socially conservative. Um, and considering that Donald Trump is likely to win the state by a safe margin, and there may not be enough uh, ticket splitting there, um, that's going to really help Sherrod Brown. There's really not a lot of ticket splitting that occurs when Trump is at the top of the ballot, and that's I think going to be problematic for the Democrats in this particular cycle. Um, then we can look at lean seats for the Democrats. Um, I think Virginia, Hung Kao is running a really good campaign for Republican in a very blue state. But I just think that Tim Kaine is much too strong of a challenger. I think he's kind of escaped for the most part the curse of being a losing uh, candidate at the top of the ticket. And so I do think that Virginia, even though they did vote for Glenn Youngkin for governor, this is not a state that is going to become like Florida and start trending Republican. Also, the state of New Mexico. Um, I do think that if Dominici wins here, that it will be quite the upset. But I think that Martin Heinrich has kept a low enough profile where he will most likely win the trust of regular of enough regular voters to hold on to the state of New Mexico. And again, I do think that you get just remember that even with some Hispanic trends moving to the right, there's still a very large contingent of Anglo liberals who live throughout the state of New Mexico, particularly in some of the larger cities. And so I do think that New Mexico is not really in danger of flipping. I do think, though, that if Trump had an unbelievably good night and he won the state by a lean margin, and when you factor in ticket splitting, then we could see Dominici eventually pull off the upset. I also think that the state of Florida and the state of Texas will be lean. You could make the case here that Rick Scott is going to just by numbers win this by a likely margin. And in fact, I'll go ahead and flip this to likely because I have him winning this by about 6 points. Ted Cruz is going up against Colin Allred, and the Allred campaign has really been hitting Cruz over the head with ads that uh, pertain pertain to his particular stances on abortion. I think that's having somewhat of an effect. But I think that considering that Trump is going to win the state by at least 6 to 7 points, and the fact that Ted Cruz is taking the race seriously, based on what I've heard with his interviews on talk radio, I do expect him to hold on. He's a little bit more of a polarizing character, and which you can argue is a good thing or a bad thing. But it tends to make his races more closer in Texas than some of the other federal candidates. So Republicans already have control of the Senate based on this map, which is I don't think really a surprise to almost anybody. But the five races where things are really going to get close. Let's go ahead and take a look at Pennsylvania. So Bob Casey has been, I think, legitimately a juggernaut in terms of his political career. Um, but Dave McCormick has run a very good campaign, unexpectedly good. And also, Donald Trump has been spending a lot of time in Pennsylvania, as have individuals who have been either coordinating with this campaign or not coordinating with this campaign. So there's a lot of Republican activity in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of voters, particularly in Eastern Pennsylvania, who I think who voted for Biden in 2020 are either not going to vote or they're going to vote Republican. And the question is how many of those folks are actually going to vote down the ballot? That's also true with the case of secular Jewish folks and with the black vote in Philadelphia, because those votes could really make all the difference, as well as the Amish vote throughout the state. We know that they're very pro-Trump at this point in time, but will they vote Republican down ballot? And I think when all said and done, there's just enough ticket splitting where Casey is going to hold on to this seat. Now, it would not surprise me if Dave McCormick was able to pull this off, but I do think that Casey has a very slight advantage in this particular case, because I do think that there's enough older Republicans um, who trust him, and he's been getting some more positive media attention in the state. And I do think that with a lot of folks in rural Pennsylvania still consuming more traditional media, that's going to help him. Okay, and then let's go ahead and look at the state of Michigan. So at least the Slotkin has had some fairly solid leads in the state in the last couple of months here or so. But lately, things have really been getting tight. And there's a couple of factors here that I look at. One is that the Republican Party in Michigan has been going through kind of a slump. They are not really well organized. And Donald Trump's success in that state in the last decade has really come down to just his overwhelming presence in the media, and with his rallies. And so he's really been kind of a self-galvanizing machine in the state of Michigan, which does help down ballot to a certain degree. I don't think that Slotkin has been running the best campaign possible. And I think that they've overlooked, I think, some of the shifts, maybe with some of the black vote in Wayne County, some of the Polish and Arab American vote in like Hamtramck, some of the working class votes you might see in Macomb County. And they really are kind of tapped out in blue upon blue, Washtenaw County in Ann Arbor. And so I think that Mike Rogers could potentially pull this off. It would be sort of a minor upset, but I'm going to give it to him right now, just because I feel like he's done a really good job of closing the race out. And really, I think the Trump momentum is probably going to help him out. And I do like the prediction of Trump winning the state by about 2 to 3. And I think that will be maybe just enough to get him across the finish. The state of Wisconsin, Republicans are probably running their best candidate with Eric Hovde. I know there's been a real push to get Sheriff Clark involved in the state, but his his background, there's some questions there, and so I think that with Hovde really being an S tier candidate for the Republicans, going up against Tammy Baldwin, who is very well liked throughout the state, or at least has been. And this is going to be also a very tight race, but I really do think that Trump is going to win Wisconsin, possibly even if he has a good night by a solid lead margin. And I do think that Eric Hovde is going to do well in a lot of the areas that Donald Trump is. He's fairly well known throughout the state, and he knows how to campaign in the state of Wisconsin. I know he's had the support rather of Senator Ron Johnson, who's also an expert at winning close races and knows where to campaign in the state of Wisconsin. And so again, I think that this will be a pickup for the Republicans as well, because I just think that they're doing a nice job of closing off the momentum here in these two states. In Baldwin and Slotkin, Michigan, which is an open seat too, by the way, do not have really quite the same clout that Bob Casey Jr. has in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, if we look at the West here, Nevada and Arizona, Kari Lake has been a polarizing figure for the state of Arizona. But the issue with Ruben Gallego is that he has a fairly radical voting record in terms of what we would consider to be based on the center right and the center left, and that is something that will give a lot of the more establishment vote in places like Maricopa and Pinal County in Arizona, those voters will probably be thinking twice. A lot of them, I think, are not even going to vote for a senator in this election race, this particular election, excuse me. And so, right now, I do have to give the race to Gallego just because I think Lake's gotten slightly more negative attention. Um, Again, there's not a lot of ticket splitting based on data. If you look at 2016 and 2020 with the success Republicans had in the House, um, it's not the big margin that I think sometimes the newbies to the world of politics think that it is. But Gallego and Lake are both pretty polarizing for folks who even dabble in politics in Arizona. But I think Gallego has the edge, just because I think he's a little bit unknown, not as well known as Kari Lake is, because Kari Lake has been very vocal about election challenges, and that has not always sat well with folks. And it'll be a close race, but I do think like if Trump can win this by a lean to likely margin, it's very possible that the down ballot effect will allow Kari Lake to pull out a victory here in the state of Arizona. Then the finally state of Nevada, I think that um, Jackie Rosen is going to pull out a narrow victory. And again, I think there's going to be some vote splitting going on in Clark County. Um, and I do think that a last minute push by the Democrats to um, get votes here on election day is going to uh, be a part of that success. I would not be surprised if this race went Republican, but I think that Rosen has had enough lead in polls, and there's really no reason to suggest um, that that the Republicans have overcome that in the Senate. And Nevada, if there's a polling error, it may actually go against the Republicans than be there with them or work in their favor. So, having said all of that, Republicans end up with 54 seats. The Democrats end up with 46. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty here. There's a lot of room for error, and I do think that this is probably a more pedestrian average prediction. Um, if Trump has a really good night, it's very possible we could see this go up from 54 to 56, 57 Senate seats. But it's going to, I think, really depend on him being able to really mobilize, not just mobilize low propensity voters, but also to convince them to vote down ballot. And if you look at the election cycle that he's had between the legal challenges that he's faced, and the obviously the attempts on his life have, I think, kind of I won't say by any means derail his campaign. I think that's a very unfair characterization, but I think it has maybe slowed it down to the point where he hasn't gotten to places where he would have liked to have gone to help Republicans, particularly populist candidates, win in these down ballot races. So, but right now, as it stands, we have 54 Republicans here and 46 to the Democrats. So, all right, thank you so much.